Welcome to the Season 5 premiere of Shades of Us. I'm your host, Daryl Brown.
Part of what makes New York City one of the most memorable cities in the world is its diversity. This month, we talk to members of the transgender community as they guide us through their journey to finding their identity in different spaces of art, mentoring, and community.
According to a 2018 study on transgender victimization, transgender people are over 4 times more likely than cisgender people to experience violent victimization, including rape, sexual assault, and aggravated or simple assault.
First, let's meet a woman who has been a fierce advocate for trans rights for over 20 years and was crucial in getting gender identity and gender expression added to New York's hate crime legislation.
My name is Kiara St. James. My pronouns are she, her, goddess. I am the founder and executive director of New York Transgender Advocacy Group, as well as being commissioner on gender and equity for the mayor's office. I'm just a small town city girl from Beaumont, Texas. So coming to New York City and being able to have that type of impact in regards to being recognized by the mayor, by my colleagues, in all branches of city government. It's such an honor that I just can't get enough of. My father came from Lake Charles, Louisiana. My mother was born in Corpus Christi, grew up in Beaumont, Texas. They met in Houston at TSU, Texas State University, where they were very active in a lot of civil rights initiatives. And then they got involved with Black Panthers. You know, of course, we could be the target of someone's bigotry. So I've always operated under that mindset that I'm not a victim, right? Although I have been targeted, people's bias, but I would say that my parents were very instrumental in instilling that in me and my siblings, that we are just as good as anyone else. When I was in a shelter, Wards Island specifically, that the men loved the girls, like they loved us, These men would allow trans women, gender nonconforming, and effeminate men as well to the front of the line when it came to going into the cafeteria. And so oftentimes this certain cis Black woman would remind everyone in line that this was a male facility, there are no women in here except the staff. And it was a way to get those men who did not have a problem with us to start treating us differently. I think for a lot of women across the board, not just cis Black women, but I do feel that a lot of them have fed into supporting toxic masculinity. And, so although a lot of women talk about wanting equal rights, at the same time, want you to open the door for them, get up when they enter the subway car and you're sitting down while they're standing. That all is tied into an expectation of centering cis women. And so when cis women, cis Black women that I'm speaking of right now, see that cis Black men are comfortable talking to Black women with trans experience, or maybe just a very flamboyant Black gay man, it makes them start to question the sexuality of that man, as opposed to say, oh, I think it's wonderful that Black men are respecting Black women with trans experience, are effeminate Black men. But oftentimes they don't see it that way. They use that, they weaponize it. So I learned at a very early age to police my gender and to present masculine. I remember there were times I would get in fights with my sisters over playing with their Barbie dolls, pretending to be like female characters, Wonder Woman being one of them. I often talk about my affinity to Janet Jackson's character, Penny, in Good Times, because I also have an iron burn from my mother. as a way of like correcting my behavior, and my father making me box my older brother, and like that was like a requirement. Like I had to learn how to box, I had to learn how to like man up, and so I would say that it was traumatic, like being 6, 7 years old and being told that the way that I naturally acted, there was something wrong with that. Bali White has been very instrumental in my life, just really being one of the first persons I met, first black woman of trans experience I met who did not have that experience of prostituting, of being a sex worker. And that was like amazing to me that like, so how are you making a living if you're not doing sex work? And she's like, I have a job, and she was able to like show me that there was another alternative or option to just sex work. Sex work, yes, sex work is work, yes, I believe this. But I do also believe that there's other options that we need to encourage our community to do. And so Bali was really that person that made me realize that I could change my trajectory. She had a very different upbringing, being from Indianapolis. Her family recognized immediately that, oh, if you're gonna be this, we're gonna have to make sure that we put you in this. And like really gave her the tools to really navigate and thrive. One of my first time meeting her was at an event at this organization called GMAD, Gay Men of African Descent. And I remember her coming to the table where it was food laid out and I was getting my plate. And she's like, don't you feel like a woman? And I looked at her and I was like, no, not really. And she's like, I do. And she just sashayed away. And so that's every time we reminisce, we talk about that. She's like, girl, I saw it in you. Even though you didn't see it and you were trying to act like a boy, I saw the girl in you. Transitioning has really saved my life. I think people are surprised to hear that, but I do feel that it gave me an opportunity to really like center the goddess in me. For me, my rite of passage was one of the street raising me to be a hoodlum of sorts as a sex worker. But what I've learned is that those qualities were not all bad qualities, right? A lot of those qualities could be transferred into my professional life. And so I feel that there's a merging that you see today that is Kiara. But I also would say that I've learned also to not feel that I have to introduce myself as a woman of trans experience or someone who is trans. I can just introduce myself as Kiara. It's not necessary for you to tell people that you're trans, what your HIV status is. Just come to the table as you, because we don't expect that from anyone else. We don't ask other folks to come to the table, say their genders, to talk about their HIV status. Oh, and we don't ask them to talk about their genitalia either.
According to the Trevor Project's 2021 study on diversity of non-binary youth, 50% of youth who identified as non-binary also identified as transgender.
Sometimes the static binary of gender doesn't always fit, as with this Gen Zer who turned to the internet to first find belonging.
I remember I cried. I cried at the computer the first time that ever happened to me, because it was like the first time I ever felt like I was validated, I was seen, I was a person, and I remember like walking out into the world like, this is me, like I'm gender fluid, like hear me world, and it was just a really, really great experience for me. My name is Sam Asensio. My pronouns are ze, them, zers, he, him, his, they, them, theirs. I am the student council president here at John Jay, which is basically the governing student body or student government. I'm also a student here, and I'm the founder and director of my own queer mentoring program, nonprofit, which is called Connections. We're the only student-led queer mentoring program actually here in New York City, and here in CUNY as well. So it actually started during the pandemic. I was working as a peer success coach, which is a job here at John Jay where we transition students who are either transfer students or first-year students into their classes. Like, we help them with homework, we give them time management tips, we give them workshops. There was a lot that they were doing, and I was like, wow, I want this, but for queer people. When it comes to the ideas of queerness, a lot of people get a lot of things conflated. A lot of people get the idea of like sexual attraction, which is like, who you want to be in bed with, like, who you want to be intimate with, and that's what sexual orientation is. A lot of people don't understand gender identity, which is, who you are in your head, like who you know yourself to be internally. That sense of self you have, that's gender identity. And gender identity and sexual preference don't always align. They're not the same either, and they don't have to relate to pronouns in the same way that, the way your gender appearance is doesn't have to match those pronouns or those ideas either. They're not these things that are like across the board the same, like she, her dresses in pink, she, her likes males and females, like she, her identifies as like, a female all the time. It doesn't work like that. There's no right way to be trans. I didn't know for a really long time. I didn't know that I didn't have to get a surgery to be trans. I didn't know being gender fluid was okay. I didn't know that I could flip my pronouns every day. I didn't know that, I could be a male today, non-binary tomorrow, and then a male again the next day, and that is perfectly valid and okay. And when we encompass these things and, these identities, we're able to understand them. We don't have to put my lived identity onto someone else. If I identify as a specific kind of trans person, if I identify as, a male that uses neo pronouns, that has no interest in getting the surgery, that doesn't make me less of a trans person. This is just a general LGBT flag, and it encompasses many things. They actually have meaning. We have light, love, earth. All of these colors have a meaning, and as we change the flag, we change it to include other voices. For example, queer people of color, or people who have had AIDS, We understand that when we build these flags, we're building a sense of identity. We're building a sense of community. And the same thing comes when we understand these trans labels, We're understanding, or the trans community, even the trans flags and symbolism. We're understanding male, female, and this in-between state we may not always understand, a mix of the two. My family is from El Salvador. Both my mom and dad, they were born and raised there. I grew up here in New Jersey, but we've kind of always had a really kind of strong connection to our homeland. But definitely kind of trying to figure out who I was very difficult. I feel like Latinx people it's not safe to be trans. It's definitely like, our word for gay people is a slur. It is just a slur. So it's hard to kind of, make that decision, like, could this cost me my family? And for me, it did. It cost me my whole family for a while. I come from a soccer family. My father was an Olympic player. My brother played professionally. My dad was also a coach for a lot of professionals. So I grew up, being trained to be an Olympic player. I grew up basically with a soccer ball in my crib. So growing up in the academy was really difficult. I was in the Olympic Player Development Program. I was a part of FIFA, and we all know FIFA has its issues now, but back then, it's not something we really talked about, and being, Latinx, it's a huge part of who we were, part of our identity, and it was something my entire family for generations had. So for me, it was just so difficult to kind of join a team, and you're supposed to be a part of a team, you're supposed to work together, and then me being identified as like MVP every year, getting the most points, like being shown in our college reels, going to college showcases, being picked by colleges, being on the highest ranking boards, and feeling so alone. So you have to be able to read the field, read minute differences, and tell your team where to move at a glance. You have to be able to tell that the wind's gonna move a specific way to ensure that this one play could get you the win or even turn the tides of a game. And it's a lot to just, sit there, take that breath in and listen and try to, really understand yourself in the moment and understand your team, but at the same time have such turmoil. I think that's something I definitely learned, is to weather storms, because I've been in so many storms by myself. I walked away from the sport with, 3 ligaments broken in my knee. That was not something I willingly chose to do. I think if it was up to me, I would have gone my whole life lying to myself. I think that the universe had a plan for me to really find myself, because it was hard. It was hard to walk away. It was my whole life. This is the one thing where you feel like you're enough. Despite what you really are in the inside, this is the one place you're enough. And then in an instant, in one singular play, to have that taken away from you, I can't describe that heartbreak. It's every day, it's hard to look at my own trophies. Even the John Jay soccer team, like sometimes I want to go to their, games and cheer them on, but it's so emotionally difficult to talk to them at like such a nuanced level. Like I understand this at such a professional level that I could really understand what you're going through, but I can't even speak about it because it causes me so much pain to realize that like it had to take a serious injury that to this day hinders me to walk to recognize myself. It was always about inspiring and being that cheerleader on the side, and I never felt like I really got to live that full potential in soccer, but I'm living my full potential here in academia because I get to cheer on like 56 students per caseload I have here just with my job alone now, you know? And now I'm working with over 100 plus students, getting to tell them like I'm here. They get to walk into this office every day and I get to just cheer them on, listen to them, know that I can do something. And I'm a main player with these students. I feel like I'm finally part of a team, so soccer taught me what I didn't want, academia gave me what I always wanted.
My past belongs to me. Your past belongs to you. But the future belongs to us.
Dance is how our next guest uses artistry to honor their Indonesian ancestry and transgender identity.
My ethnic identity and my mixed race identity always was more clear to me when I was younger. So I like to say that I definitely understood that I was mixed race before I could articulate that I was queer and trans. My name is Zave Martoharjono. I'm an artist. Art making has been the place for me to explore all of these questions about myself. Both my Italian-American family and my Indonesian family and we all lived in different countries when I was growing up. So seeing my family was going for visits, sometimes to Indonesia, sometimes to Canada, and sometimes to Massachusetts. All of my extended family is very warm and loving and close in their ways, but I don't necessarily feel I have a particular alliance to one or the other. I was always exotic to my white family, and I was always white to my Asian family. So there was never really an affirmative place to land. My mother raised me as a single mother. Even though there is a big Indonesian community in New York, I didn't grow up inside of that. My artistic practice has been a place for me to really actually do research and make work that pays homage to my ancestral cultural practices. I also take those stories and I queer them, or I make them sort of politically relevant to questions of persecution or crisis that we're going through today. Being trans has been a very kind of slow and long process. I think that the reason I was so tentative about it is because across my life, there has never been one place for me to belong. There was never a clear, yes, you are part of this group. My family and I moved to Brooklyn, and I was meeting a lot of queer and trans people. I was meeting a lot of organizers and activists and musicians, and I was going out a lot, and I was always gravitating towards trans people. It took me a really long time to actually affirm myself as trans, because there aren't any trans people in my family, and because I didn't really have the language for it. My family is supportive of my queerness and me being trans. I don't think they necessarily understand exactly what that means. I'm non-binary and I'm genderqueer, so I actually embrace all genders. I embrace my feminist, I embrace my masculinity, and I know also that neither my feminist nor my masculinity are typical. When I first started taking hormones and talking about it with my family, I think they wanted to know, oh, are you, so you're not a woman and you identify as a man. So when I was having those conversations with my family 10 years ago, there wasn't a bigger conversation going on. They didn't have any tools to draw from. Trans history and trans identity is so big and beautiful and complicated. In 2007, I started as a graduate student at the City College of New York, and that's when I started making experimental films about my identities, about my ethnic identities, about my gender identities, and also about my sort of ancestral longing for a sense of belonging inside of my Indonesian heritage. Over the years, I really have been trying to understand more about Indonesian dance, ritual practices, and cultural practices. From my mother and from my oma, I got a lot of the sort of mythological stories, and we would go see Indonesian dance theater when we would visit home, when we would go to Jakarta or when we would go to Bali. Art is a space where you can have a really complex conversation about something like identity. I self-produce all my work. I'm the person raising all the money to pay all the artists I work with. I am truly an independent artist in the sense that I don't have a lot of institutional support. I don't have a lot of structures of support, so it really is kind of grassroots. How is it that communities of color, indigenous communities, queer and trans communities, how is it that we are supporting each other, dealing with the multiple crises that we face? I've been feeling it's more important as an artist to focus on what keeps us going and how it is that we're surviving these impossible times. I'm really interested in narrative that is ambiguous, that is sensorial. When I think about spaces, the spaces that I exist in, the spaces that I travel through, I guess I think about it as these different universes. They're all kind of in a choreography. They're all in some kind of rotation. In my body, all of these identities are flowing. They're all encapsulated. Particularly with making performance and dance, I've been finding that there's so much space to articulate my different identities without having to explain them. I'm 38. For me, these identities and these spaces are not static at all. As I get older, I think the challenge is to keep changing as the worlds that I'm a part of evolve. This year, I lost one of my trans elders, Rusty Mae Moore, who was a woman who really made a huge difference for young trans women in New York City. She opened her home to trans women who didn't have a place to live in the 90s, and she was an activist and she was a professor. When I think about legacy and my personal legacy, I don't think about it as an individual. I think so much about my queer elders who, when I was young, just really modeled to me how to organize community, how to bring people together, and how to make an open space to do creative work.
In times of crisis, we're often told to turn away from one another. We're often told to turn away from the communities that can support us. And it is in these exact times that we should turn towards each other.
Thanks for joining us in this Season 5 premiere show. If you want to know more about the guests we featured, check out our Instagram page at Shades of Us TV and online at tv.cuny.edu. I'm Darryl Brown. See you next time on Shades of Us.